What if the people you trusted the most were the first to leave when everything fell apart? What if the boldest voices in the room became the quietest when the darkness arrived? The Chosen. Season 5. Episode 2 doesn't just tell a story, it holds up a mirror. A mirror that reflects our own fears, our weakness, our silence when faith is tested. As Jesus sits with his disciples during their final moments together before the storm, he says the words that cut deeper than any sword. All of you will fall away. Not just Peter, not just Judas. All of them. And in those words, we're invited to see something hauntingly familiar. Not just their failure, but ours. Because this isn't just about betrayal. It's about love that sees the betrayal coming and stays anyway. As the episode opens, we are brought into a space that feels heavy with silence, with questions no one dares ask aloud. The disciples are seated with Jesus, but something is different now. The joy that once danced in their conversations has faded. What remains is uncertainty. Jesus doesn't ease into the moment. He speaks the truth, direct, unfiltered. You will all fall away because of me this night. The words hang in the air like smoke. At first, the disciples can't believe what they're hearing. How could they? They've walked with him. They've seen miracles. They've heard the voice of God. And now, this? Peter, always the first to speak, tries to push back. His loyalty roars louder than his fear, and he declares boldly that he will never fall away, that he will die before denying Jesus. But Jesus doesn't match his intensity. He responds with calm sorrow. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. It's not a threat. It's not anger. It's prophecy. A mirror being held up. Not just to Peter, but to all of them. And the reflection staring back is one they cannot bear to look at. This moment is more than dramatic dialogue. It's a deep exposure of human nature. The disciples don't realize it yet, but they are standing on the edge of a cliff. The man they thought would lead them into a victorious kingdom is now preparing them for rejection, betrayal, pain. And worse, he's not planning to stop it. He's walking toward it. Jesus begins to remind them of the journey. He speaks of when he sent them out with nothing. No money, no sandals, just faith. Back then, they were received with open arms. The message was fresh. The people were curious. But now, the tide has turned. The world is no longer welcoming them. The world is preparing to strike back. And Jesus doesn't sugarcoat this change. He tells them to take their money bags, to prepare their swords, not to fight, but to survive. Not because he wants violence, but because he knows what's coming. Simon the Zealot, ever the fighter, reacts immediately. He produces 2 swords, believing that they're ready for whatever comes next. And Jesus replies with a quiet phrase that slices through the noise. It is enough. Many won't understand what he means, but Jesus isn't talking about weapons. He's talking about readiness. Readiness not of the hands, but of the heart. Because he knows they're not ready, not yet. They don't see the full picture. They don't realize the battle ahead is not against flesh and blood. It's against fear, doubt, betrayal, and themselves. Jesus' calm throughout this moment is unsettling. He knows Judas has already made his choice. He knows Peter will fall. He knows the others will scatter. And yet, he doesn't pull away. He stays. He teaches. He loves. Because this moment isn't just about who they are now. It's about who they will become. That's what makes this episode so soul-piercing. It doesn't hide the weakness of the disciples. It reveals it, gently, honestly. And through that, shows us the strength of Jesus' love. A love that doesn't flinch when we fail. A love that sees our denials before they happen and still calls us worthy. This section of the story is not about final moments. It's about transformation. Jesus isn't giving up on them. He's preparing them. Not for battle, but for surrender. Not to raise swords, but to carry crosses. Because faith isn't proven in comfort. It's proven in the breaking. And that breaking is about to begin. As Jesus speaks, the room doesn't just grow quiet, it grows heavy. There's a shift in the air, a weight pressing on every heart. The disciples exchange glances, unsure, almost afraid to speak. The confidence they carried days ago, when crowds followed them, when miracles lit up the sky, has vanished. Now they sit in the stillness, realizing something they've been trying to ignore. This is not the journey they expected. Nathanael breaks the silence. His voice shakes, not from fear of danger, but from the ache of confusion. "Why are you leaving?" That single question echoes what all of them are thinking. Why must the one they've followed, the one who changed their lives, now speak as if he's already gone? Why talk of separation, swords, survival? When they're with the Messiah, shouldn't that be enough? Jesus doesn't answer the way they want. He doesn't soothe the fear with easy promises. Instead, he speaks of fulfillment, of prophecy unfolding. He refers to Scripture. He was numbered with the transgressors. The meaning is clear. Jesus is placing himself among the condemned. He's telling them plainly, the path he's about to walk leads not to glory, but to suffering. And worse, he's walking that road alone. But here's what The Chosen captures so powerfully. This isn't just Jesus predicting his own death. It's Jesus preparing the hearts of those he loves for what they cannot yet bear. He's not angry that they'll fall away. He's not shocked that Peter will deny him. He knows. He's always known. And still, he calls them friends. Still, he invites them to the table. Still, he believes in their future. This moment is a quiet heartbreak, because while Jesus speaks, there's a growing awareness in the room, a shadow no one dares to name. Judas is gone, and though no one says his name, his absence screams louder than any words. Hours ago, he sat among them, dipped bread in the same bowl, shared laughter and mission. Now, he walks in darkness, and the disciples don't even realize what that means. But Jesus does. It's that silent knowing that makes this scene unforgettable. Jesus knows that betrayal is already in motion. He knows soldiers are preparing. He knows that soon, one kiss will begin the cascade of chaos. And yet, he doesn't flinch. He keeps teaching. He keeps preparing them, not to escape, but to endure. Simon the Zealot, armed and ready, still doesn't understand. He believes in action. He believes in defense. And when he hears Jesus mention swords, he thinks the revolution is near. But Jesus doesn't want a revolution of blood. He wants a revolution of hearts. That's why he says, "It is enough." Not because the swords will protect them, but because he needs them to stop trying to understand the mission with human minds. What's coming can't be fought. It must be surrendered to. There's something deeply human about the disciples in this moment. They're not villains. They're not cowards. They're just not ready. And how could they be? How can anyone prepare for the unraveling of everything they believed? They thought Jesus would establish a kingdom, that he'd overthrow Rome, that they'd reign with him. But now they're being told the opposite. He will be arrested. They will be scattered. And the world will not celebrate them. It will reject them. And yet, this is exactly why Jesus chose them. Not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to learn, even through failure. That's the heart of this episode. It doesn't glorify the disciples, nor does it shame them. It simply tells the truth, that even the closest followers can fall, that faith doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like trembling hands, still reaching out. The tension in the upper room isn't created by music or lighting. It's created by what's unspoken. Judas's name unmentioned, Peter's denial creeping closer, the garden, waiting. And Jesus, holding all of it in his heart, still chooses to speak love into the silence, still chooses to warn them, not to scare them, but to prepare them. Because the path of redemption is never paved with ease. It's built through brokenness. And as the night stretches on, the disciples still don't know what awaits. But we do. And that's what makes it so hard to watch. Because we see the heartbreak coming. And Jesus sees it too. It's in this section of the story that The Chosen tightens the emotional grip. Jesus isn't just speaking now. He's cutting through every illusion. The illusions the disciples have about themselves, about their faith, about how far they'd go for him. And he doesn't use parables. He doesn't soften the blow. He speaks with piercing clarity. You will all fall away because of me this night. These words don't land gently. They crack through the room like thunder. Peter, fiery and loyal, refuses to accept it. He stands up in protest, heart pounding, voice full of pride. Even if all fall away, I never will. And for a moment, you want to believe him. You want to believe that his devotion will carry him through, that somehow this one disciple will hold the line. But Jesus knows Peter better than Peter knows himself, and his answer is as painful as it is precise. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Silence falls again. Not the calm kind, but the kind that chokes. Because if Peter, the boldest, most outspoken, most passionate among them, is going to fall, what chance do the rest of them have? This is where the chosen draws the veil back on something we don't like to face, that sometimes love and fear exist side by side, that you can truly love someone and still fail them, that you can believe with all your heart and still run when the moment of testing comes. And Jesus isn't shocked. He isn't disappointed. He's heartbreakingly honest, but also heartbreakingly gentle. What stands out here isn't just what Jesus says, it's how he says it. There's no anger in his voice, no bitterness. He doesn't say, "You will fall away," like an accusation. He says it like a man carrying the weight of that failure on his own back, already choosing to forgive it. And here's the emotional twist. Jesus isn't pushing them away for their coming failure. He's drawing them closer despite it. He's letting them know in advance, not to shame them, but so they'll remember later. When Peter hears the rooster crow, when the others scatter in the garden, when shame threatens to consume them, they'll remember this moment. They'll remember that Jesus knew, and still he stayed with them. That even in the face of betrayal, his love did not waver. It's this blend of sorrow and grace that makes the Chosen's portrayal so unique. Because while the disciples are stumbling in their confusion, Jesus is steady in his mission. He's preparing himself to suffer alone, not just physically, but emotionally. To watch his closest friends abandon him, to be kissed by a traitor, to hear Peter's denial echo across the courtyard. And still, he doesn't change course. The deeper meaning of this episode isn't found in action. It's found in the tension between promise and pain. The disciples are still clinging to hope that things will make sense, that maybe Jesus will reveal a plan that avoids the cross. But Jesus doesn't offer a rescue plan. He offers a reminder that his kingdom is not of this world, that the path of glory passes through grief, and grief is beginning to settle in. Not fully, not yet. But like a storm on the horizon, it's moving closer. We watch the disciples wrestle with emotions they can't name. We see the fear rising in their eyes. Not fear of death, but fear of being without him. Fear of losing their anchor. Because Jesus has been everything. Their teacher, their miracle worker, their comfort, their compass. And now they're being told that this presence, this light in their lives, is about to leave. What do you do when the person who gave your life meaning says goodbye? You panic, you deny, you cling, and we see it happening in real time. The disciples are trying to argue with destiny, but destiny isn't listening. It's already unfolding. And yet, underneath all the heartbreak, there is purpose. Jesus isn't just foretelling failure. He's planting seeds of redemption, seeds that will only sprout after the storm. He knows that Peter's denial will break him, but that brokenness will become the ground for boldness. He knows that Thomas will doubt, but that doubt will one day lead to unshakable belief. He knows they will scatter, but they will also return. And that's the heart of this scene. Not the fall, but the return. Not the silence of fear, but the roar of grace that comes after. The Chosen doesn't give us a perfect group of men. It gives us real ones, struggling, failing, wounded, but still chosen. Because what makes someone worthy of the mission Jesus gives isn't that they never fall. It's that when they do, they get back up, with His help. And so, in this quiet, trembling room, as swords are misunderstood, as prophecy is fulfilled, and as hearts are breaking, Jesus keeps loving them, keeps calling them, not because they're ready, but because one day they will be. As the room falls into a stillness that feels almost sacred, a quiet weight settles over the disciples, the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from the sense that something sacred is about to break. This is the moment before everything unravels, and the chosen captures that stillness with haunting beauty. You can almost hear their thoughts racing. The disciples are looking at one another, eyes filled with questions they can't ask and fears they don't want to name. And above all, there's that heavy, lingering realization. Judas is gone. No one speaks his name, but his absence speaks louder than anything they could say. One moment he was there, eating the bread, drinking the wine, reclining beside the Messiah. And now, nothing. It's like a shadow has slipped into the room, a betrayal not yet seen, but already felt. And Jesus, who has known it all along, carries that silent pain in his eyes. This is not just a betrayal of trust, it's the betrayal of a relationship. A friend, a brother, a companion who walked the same dusty roads, witnessed the same miracles, laughed at the same stories, and yet chose a bag of silver over love. Jesus doesn't need to chase Judas. He doesn't call him back, because the plan is already in motion. And that, in itself, is heartbreaking. What The Chosen does so brilliantly here is show us that the real conflict isn't just external, it's internal. The swords, the supplies, none of that will prepare the disciples for what's coming. Because the real battle isn't against Rome, it's against fear, against pride, against the human instinct to run from pain. That's why Jesus' words hit like lightning. It is enough. It's not about the swords. It never was. It's not about defense or resistance. It's about surrender. Enough preparing in the wrong direction. Enough clinging to false hope. Enough misunderstanding the mission. Because the mission isn't survival. It's sacrifice. And that sacrifice starts now. Not on the cross, but in the upper room, where Jesus lays down his emotional armor and faces the truth of what's coming, fully exposed, fully human, and still fully committed. Peter clenches his jaw. Nathanael wipes his eyes. Thomas stares at the floor, unsure of what to believe. And yet, in the middle of this tension, Jesus remains steady. The storm is coming, and he's the calm before it. Not because he doesn't feel the fear, but because he chooses to trust the Father more than he fears the future. This is where the episode begins to shift from prophecy to purpose. The disciples don't understand the full picture, but Jesus does. He's not preparing them to win a war. He's preparing them to become the foundation of something eternal. A church built not on strength, but on grace. Not on perfection, but on redemption. He's already seen their fall, and yet he chooses to build on them anyway. Think about that. The Peter who will swear he never knew Jesus will one day die for him. The Thomas who will doubt will one day proclaim him as my Lord and my God. The disciples who scatter in fear will one day preach with fire. And it all begins here, in this quiet, aching moment when they are most unaware of their destiny. The Chosen doesn't give us a sanitized version of faith. It shows us the mess, the fear, the failures. It shows us the eyes of men who are terrified of losing their Savior because they don't yet understand that he's about to save them in a way they never expected. And perhaps the most powerful part of this episode is what it leaves unsaid. Jesus doesn't plead for their loyalty. He doesn't beg them to stay strong. He simply tells them the truth and lets them wrestle with it. That's the kind of leadership that breaks you because it's so raw, so real. He could have given them more comfort. He could have performed another miracle to boost their faith. But instead, he gives them prophecy, because prophecy doesn't just predict the future, it prepares the heart. And so, as the camera metaphorically pulls back and the scene draws to a close, we're not left with victory. we're left with vulnerability, with a fragile group of men who will soon face the darkest night of their lives, and a Savior who walks toward that darkness with open arms. What makes The Chosen Season 5 Episode 2 unforgettable is that it doesn't rush to the resurrection. It pauses in the pain. It lets us sit in the sorrow. Because that's where real transformation begins. Not in the triumph, but in the trial. Not on the mountaintop, but in the silence before the storm. And perhaps that's what Jesus meant when he said, "It is enough." Not that they were ready, but that his love was, his plan was, his grace was. Enough to cover the fall, enough to wait through the silence, enough to rise again when the sun breaks over the empty tomb. Sometimes the most powerful moments in our faith journey are not the ones filled with miracles, but the ones filled with silence, confusion, and heartbreak. In The Chosen Season 5 Episode 2, we're reminded that even the closest followers of Jesus, the ones who walked beside him, touched his hands, heard his voice, they fell, they broke, they doubted, and yet they were still chosen. That truth should shake us because it means there's hope for all of us, for every moment we've denied him, every time we've run, every time we've questioned his plan. Jesus saw their weakness and loved them anyway. He sees yours too, and he still calls you by name. This episode doesn't just tell a story from the past, it whispers to your present. Maybe you're standing at your own table of confusion right now. Maybe your faith feels like it's slipping through your fingers. Maybe you're afraid of what's coming next. But remember this: failure is not the end of your story. It never was. Just like Peter, just like the others, your fall can be the beginning of something sacred, something stronger, something eternal. Because in the silence before the storm, grace is already on the way. And that is what makes the story of Jesus so unforgettable.